Okay. Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on what coast you're on at the moment, and welcome. My name is Casey Murphy, and I'm ACT's Director of Programs and Events. I want to thank you for joining us today for ACT's second webinar this month entitled Preview of Project Culdesac, the first car free neighborhood in the U.S. And it's sponsored today by our friends at the ACT Valley of the Sun chapter. Before we hear from our presenters this afternoon, I wanted to quickly take care of a few housekeeping items. First, all attendees are on mute during this webinar. If you have a question or a problem hearing us, please type it in the chat box in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to get your question answered as the webinar gets going. Second, we will be hosting a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to type in your questions as we go in the Q&A box located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Please note when typing in your question to also identify who the question is for, or if it's for all panelists. Finally, this session is being recorded and we'll have the recording up on the ACT website within 24 hours after the presentation ends. Now I'd like to go ahead and pass things over to David Strauss, ACT's Executive Director, to give an update on what ACT currently has going on. David?
Thank you, Casey. Good afternoon and welcome to all of you joining us today. As the premier association for TDM professionals, of course, our goal is to build a strong community of individuals and organizations working to advance and implement TDM at their work sites and within their communities across the country. Webinars like today's are an important benefit to you as a member of ACT, providing you with valuable information on the latest trends and important knowledge to make you more impactful in the work that you do. I know we have a full program and a great topic, so I want to just provide a few brief updates on what we're doing before turning it over. This past month has really been a busy one for ACT's public policy efforts. Last week, we hosted Representative Earl Blumenauer for a member briefing, and you can watch that video of the great conversation that we had on our website. We're also thrilled to announce that Representative Chuy Garcia out of Illinois is our new champion and lead sponsor for ACT's More Through TDM Act. Rep. Garcia officially introduced an updated version of this legislation last week and issued a Dear Colleague letter to the full House seeking original co-sponsors for the bill just a few days ago. The More Through TDM Act will do so much for TDM across the country. First and foremost, it will codify at the federal level definitions for TDM and TDM strategies, providing clear guidance to US DOT about the role and need for TDM, along with greater clarity on funding eligibility. The legislation would also establish a new federal TDM program funded at $250 million a year for 5 years. That's $1.25 billion for TDM, which is huge, providing significant new funding to support the implementation of TDM plans that would also be required at the state level. Now the task is before all of us to raise awareness of the legislation in Congress. Many members have already started reaching out to their members within their local districts to promote the bill, which is wonderful to see. On April 12th, ACT will be hosting an afternoon of informational sessions to provide you with a more detailed understanding of the legislation and easy steps you can take to educate your members of Congress. I hope that many of you will sign up for one of these sessions and help make TDM a core strategy within federal transportation policy. ACT's Future of Commuting Summit is now just 1 month away. This half-day virtual event will present ideas around future trends, planning needs, and the lasting impacts of the pandemic on commuting. There'll be ample time to participate in interactive small group discussions during the event, which is modeled after last year's very popular TDM forum. Registration is open, it's extremely affordable, and available through our website. Sorry, it was wonderful to see the activity taking place across the country in our chapters and councils. And I want to make sure you all take a moment to visit ACT's website to stay up to date on the various meetings, webinars, and networking sessions that are taking place throughout the organization. There really is something for everyone going on out there right now. And to the non-members joining us today, welcome. I hope that you'll give serious thought to joining ACT and becoming a member of our great community of TDM professionals. There's a tremendous value that you receive when coming together within the largest association for TDM professionals in the United States. After today's event, you'll receive a note from Elizabeth Denton, our membership experience manager, offering an opportunity to connect and learn more about ACT. And I hope you'll take her up on the offer. Now on to today's webinar, a preview of Project Culdesac. This is an exciting new topic area as we get an opportunity to preview the design plan for this groundbreaking new neighborhood in Tempe, Arizona, which aims to create a unique urban environment built around a car-free living with robust use of new mobility options. It's my pleasure to introduce Chris Barker, our Vice President of the Valley of the Sun chapter and President of Chris Barker Consulting, to kick things off. Chris is a 20-year veteran of global technology and the transportation industry. He's the founder of the technology and transportation firm CBC, where he's worked with transportation and technology companies, cities, and governments around the world to advance new forms of mobility, energy services, and city development projects. Chris is currently a Transportation Smart Cities Advisor for Cities Today Institute, helping cities around the world with transportation infrastructure and autonomous surface transportation planning. In 2016, Chris was an advisor to Vulcan on the US DOT Smart City Challenge project and has continued to advance smart city transportation development projects across the globe. The CBC team has also developed and deployed self-driving car simulators for state DOTs, universities, museums, and other public facilities to teach the public about self-driving vehicles. Chris is also a former board member of ACT. So Chris, I turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you, David. And good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. We are thrilled to be hosting this webinar today to our Valley of the Sun chapter. And we're talking about something that's pretty groundbreaking, a car-free community. When you think about the car culture of the United States, the idea of developing a neighborhood or an area without cars is definitely a new turn. And we're thrilled to have Ryan Johnson, CEO of Culdesac and co-founder of Culdesac, with us this morning. Ryan, welcome.
Great to be here.
And we also have Lava Sunder, who is the general manager for the Culdesac project. And Lava, also welcome. Great to have you join us this morning.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So I thought it'd be a great place to start is if both of you could give a little bit of your backgrounds on the work you've done prior to the Culdesac project and how that's influenced how this project has come about. And Ryan, if you would like to start, that would be great.
Yeah, so my background's in real estate transportation. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having us. There's just lots of exciting things going on in this space. You mentioned you had Blumenauer on, who's sponsoring the E-Bike Act, which I think is something that could be quite impactful to accelerate the changes happening in the US. But I'll do my background. I grew up in Phoenix as a third generation Phoenician and thought it was a great city growing up, perhaps naively. And for college, I was deciding between going to MIT, where I would have had $150,000 of debt, or taking an in-state scholarship and going to the University of Arizona, where it was a full ride scholarship plus $50,000 on top. And I chose the latter. And two things happened from the scholarship. The first is that part of it was for traveling abroad. And I went to multiple places in college in 60 countries by the time I was 25. And an early experience was going to Budapest with the entire class and said, oh, wow, Phoenix is not the best way to make a city. Instead of sprawl, having great transportation and density and walkability is a better place to live. And that started this passion for cities. And the other thing is that a friend and I used our scholarship money as the seed capital to build a real estate business, learning how to buy homes, how to renovate them, putting in the sweat equity, and we built a portfolio of 60 bedrooms by the time we graduated college. And that became the foundation. Later, I joined Open Door as part of the founding team. The person that I had done the real estate with is now the CEO. And we applied what we learned. Before Open Door, I spent about a decade working in transportation with trains and helicopters and buses, including the New York MTA. And at Open Door, for those who don't know, it's empowering everyone with the freedom to move. It makes it easy to buy or sell a home. The first product was you enter your address, you answer a few basic questions, and you get an all cash offer and choose your closing date. And then Open Door actually buys the home from you, does renovations, puts it back on the market, and people can use the app to build the home, to visit the home on their schedule. And what we saw at Open Door was enormous demand for walkable neighborhoods, where the majority of the US wants to live in a walkable neighborhood, but fewer than 10% does. And as a result, understanding the insights from transportation, we know that it's because we stopped building walkable neighborhoods with the advent of the car. And we saw the opportunity to combine real estate, transportation, and technology to build the first car-free city in the US. And we're starting with the first car-free neighborhood built from scratch in the US. And that's Culdesac Tempe, which Lava runs.
Which is a great segue. Lava, a little bit of background on your side as well.
Yeah, great segue. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here as well. So my name is Lava. I'm the general manager of Culdesac Tempe. I live car-free in Tempe. That's where I'm calling from. And I get around exclusively by e-bike, but similar to Ryan, it wasn't always like that for me. I was born and raised in Houston, where it sort of feels like the easiest thing to do to get around is drive. So I was the type of person that got my license when I was 16. I drove everywhere. And it really was only until I got to college that I realized that there was another way to live. I'm also a first generation immigrant. And so my family moved to Houston without a lot of existing community. And so living in Houston for me, although it was, a very wonderful kind of upbringing with my family, didn't feel like there was a lot of community, partially because of the environment I grew up in. I opened my door and there was just big roads and driveways. And once again, I didn't really know that there was another way to live until you sort of saw this much more walkable living in college and then later living in San Francisco. Prior to Culdesac was at McKinsey, where I helped lead digital transformations of traditional industries. So like construction companies, mining companies. And so I'm very passionate about the intersection of community building, transportation, but also how the digital and built environment can interact. And so that's why I'm very excited to help build the first car-free city neighborhood built from scratch in the US, which is of course Culdesac Tempe.
This is great. Thank you both. And so Lava, I think you want to maybe just give us a little bit of a walkthrough, a preview of the project and what it looks like and how it's taking shape. And then we'll dive into a whole list of questions that I know we have and our audience is likely to have as well.
Yeah, that is exactly right. So can everyone see my screen? Yeah, I see a good thumbs up. Thank you. So this is the Culdesac Tempe site plan. This is what our kind of community looks like. And once again, it's the first car-free neighborhood built from scratch in the US. So it's 17 acres, it's 760 units, and it's 1,000 people. And although there is a small parking lot for visitors and guests, and that's what you see on the west side here, the majority of the site has no parking, no roads, and there's actually zero residential parking on the site. And so this was a result of a historic development agreement between the city of Tempe and Culdesac to actually completely waive the residential parking requirement. And even further, when people sign their leases at Culdesac, they actually have to sign an agreement not to park a car on site or in the surrounding neighborhood. So it's very much innovative in the way that people will get around and in the way that people will have cars on site, or rather not. So these are kind of the spots I'll take folks through on the tour. And just to give a high level overview, the northwest corner with all of the orange is the retail center of the site. So we'll talk about how we have 16,000 square feet of retail and what that looks like. Then going through the site, you have the intersection of the kind of commercial area and the residential area. And there's actually some interesting things there with how we got past, fire code compliance. Then we'll go through a residential block and finally end at the park, which I think we all saw a glimpse of earlier, the first slide that was shown. So I'll start here. This is the entrance to the site. And this really shows all of the transportation options that Culdesac-Tempe residents will have access to. So I'm sure folks on the call will be very excited to know that Culdesac-Tempe is actually built right on a light rail stop. It's the Smith Martin Apache Boulevard light rail stop in Tempe, and there will be a dedicated pedestrian crossway from Culdesac-Tempe to the light rail station. There's also a protected bike lane just in front of the site that you can see here. And then kind of moving on, will be integrated with rideshare companies. So that pickup and drop off from a rideshare perspective is very seamless, similar to how you'd be picked up at an airport. And if you can see here, this is sort of where the pickup and drop off would be located. And then if I turn all the way around, we have our commercial and visitor parking lot right here. You can see just the glimpse of it. And something else that's interesting is although residents won't own private cars, they'll have access to an on-site car share program. So we'll have around 20 car share cars that residents can book for, larger trips to the grocery store, weekend trips to, Sedona or Flagstaff. And so this is really all of the transportation options that residents can choose, in addition to, of course, walking and biking around Tempe.
I love it. Just one quick question. Are you able to expand the screen on your side a little bit? It looks like it might be coming across as a preview screen for some of the viewers.
How is that looking?
That looks better. Hopefully for
Cool.
everybody else watching as well. Thank you.
Yep. As we go through, we'll see essentially what the retail center of the site is. So like I said, Culdesac-Tempe has 16,000 square feet of retail. And that includes a coffee shop, which is right over here. It'll include a co-working space, which is over here. And it will also include a 5,000 square foot grocery store, which is the building with the blue awning. And finally, it'll include a restaurant that we're hoping is both, accessible enough for Culdesac-Tempe residents to eat at every day, but also a really distinctive experience for folks in the valley to kind of want to visit Culdesac from all around. Something interesting to note about the retail at Culdesac is that except for the restaurant, it's all mixed use. So taking a look at this grocery store, the bottom floor is a 5,000 square foot grocery store, but the top 2 floors are residential. And it's a type of urban product that we're really excited to deliver in a neighborhood in Tempe that doesn't currently have access to it. Walking through, we're going to what we like to call the main promenade. So it's sort of a long central spine that runs through the neighborhood, and it's 26 feet wide. And the reason why that's important is it's actually a fire lane. So although during normal and regular times, it'll just be for bikers, pedestrians, scooter riders, in case of emergency, the Tempe Fire Department can actually mount this central spine and access the entire neighborhood. So the city of Tempe has actually been an incredible partner with us in co-designing and co-developing the community. So it certainly wasn't a process where we sort of said, this is what we want the community to look like. We did a lot of collaboration to try to figure out how can we make this community car-free, but also safe for our residents. One of the other things to note, I think this is one of my favorite views of the architectural style. So the community was designed by Dan Perolik of Opticos Design. He coined the term missing middle architecture, which is this idea that, the US has a lot of single family homes and a lot of large multifamily towers, but a lack of the housing product in between, which is duplexes, triplexes, garden style apartments. And so Culdesac-Tempe is actually all 3-story buildings with a kind of mix of duplexes and triplexes. And so with the 3-story buildings, we're actually able to reach a density that's twice the density of San Francisco, but still have 3 times as much open space. And that's, of course, because we're not having to build a large surface parking lot with 1,000 parking spots. So we get all of that space and can devote it to these large plazas and courtyards, which we'll see soon. And so actually over 50% of Culdesac-Tempe is open space. I believe the average in Tempe is around 20% for a comparable development. So here we have the core residential product. We call these our residential blocks, and courtyards, which you see here, are the defining element of the Culdesac Tempe residential experience. So as I was mentioning, in my intro, I grew up in Houston, where when you open your door, you typically just see asphalt, right? You see a big road or you see a big driveway. And for Culdesac Tempe, folks will open their door and just see community. The courtyards will be sort of your outdoor living room and gathering spot, and each courtyard will have a different amenity. So some courtyards have barbecue pits that you can see here. Some courtyards will have fire pits. Others have hammocks or reading nooks. And also, we can just see that all of the units have private outdoor entrances. So unlike typical multifamily, where there's often the shared indoor corridors, every single unit at Culdesac Tempe has a private outdoor entrance. And actually, almost all units have 3 sides of natural light. Which is obviously very innovative for a typical apartment complex. The last thing to note in this is Culdesac Tempe has an extend your home on demand program. So some units in the residential courtyard actually won't be traditional residential units, but they'll be bookable spaces that your residents can access if they have friends in town or parents visiting. So these will be spaces like guest suites, office spaces, podcast studios, or even a maker space that allow you to kind of flex and contract your space needs depending on what you need. Finally, thank you. Finally, I'll jump to the main park. And I think this might be my favorite slide in the presentation, just because of how innovative it is for a multifamily development to have a half-acre main park in the development. So this park is open to the public. There'll be a dog park. There's a pool as well. And it really illustrates how much more we're able to offer our residents by not providing residential parking, and actually by enabling better land utilization through the site. And so we're very excited for folks to have access to this park, and it's one of the most popular amenities from folks that are on the wait list at Culdesac. So that's kind of the overview of the tour, Chris, and I'm happy to answer questions here, or maybe we can jump into the core set of questions.
This is great. Thank you, Lava. Very, very exciting development, and I love the design elements that were incorporated in this, which leads to a whole series of questions. So when you think about some of the traditional urban design elements that you have to factor into a project like this, and the approach you took to taking out parking and vehicles, how did that influence what the finished product is actually looking like? As far as the structure, equitable access to different residential units, access to affordable transportation, can you kind of speak to some of those things that went into the process that you and Ryan went through as you were laying out the design to your current state of development? And Ryan, you're muted.
Thank you.
Sure.
At Open Door is now buying and selling hundreds of millions of dollars of homes each month. And while I was there, I talked to thousands and thousands of customers, and there was a recurring theme. The word people kept using is cute. People don't specifically ask to live in a walkable neighborhood. They don't ask to live in a place with thoughtful architecture or a community where they actually answer their neighbors. But they talk about it indirectly, and cute is the word that kept coming up. And we realized that only 8% of the US lives in a walkable neighborhood, and 63% of millennials in the majority of the US wants to live in one. And as a result, the areas that are walkable, the prices have gone up enormously. We're not building enough walkable neighborhoods. And there's no fundamental reason why we can't, especially using the mobility technologies of the last couple decades or even longer. And so that was one of the foundational insights for Culdesac.
And Lava, your thoughts. I'm curious from the person who's managing this project day to day of the design elements and what you've learned along the way in this process.
Yeah, I think something that's really interesting about what we've done is actually spend a lot of time talking to folks who either live car-free or want to live car-free and understanding what amenities they would like to see in a neighborhood. And so when we started a couple of years ago, we asked folks, what's an amenity you'd like to see in a car-free neighborhood? And the number one amenity was a grocery store. So we really over-indexed on that in the retail aspect of Culdesac. And, we have a 5,000 square foot grocery store that'll have fresh produce and, sundry items. And so that really has influenced the site plan. We now have a wait list of folks that are planning to live at Culdesac Tempe. 60% of these people come from outside Arizona. It's a very diverse and very interesting group of people. And so now that we're a little bit later in the development process, where we finalize the site plan, but there are details like what are the amenities in the courtyard? Or what are the actual items that something like a grocery store would carry, we're able to tap into this group of people and further inform the design of the community. So one example of this is we had a co-design session with our landscape architect, floor associates, and our founding residents. And we asked them, how do you want the courtyards to feel? And one of the most interesting insights was that some residents want very social courtyards. And so these are courtyards with the barbecue pit and like clear kind of excitement for social activity. And some residents want to live on quieter courtyards where, it's maybe more meant for reading or sort of quiet contemplation with a water feature. And so that actually really influenced now what the final courtyards will look like. And so residents are able to choose based on their preferences where to live.
And speaking of residents, are the residents primarily going to be Arizona State University students, or can you kind of talk about the different types of folks that are likely to live in the community?
Sure. I think actually the kind of mix of residents is quite interesting. So it's predominantly young professionals and empty nesters and retirees. So there's a large number of folks who are, in their 20s and 30s, work in downtown Tempe or are remote workers and are really excited to have, this kind of urban walkable lifestyle that's typically only provided in cities like, San Francisco or New York, and have that lifestyle in Tempe. So like I said earlier, 60% of our founding residents come from outside Arizona. And most of these folks who are coming from outside Arizona are coming from cities like San Francisco and New York. And then, of course, the other biggest portion of founding residents are empty nesters and retirees who are really looking to have a more walkable lifestyle that's a bit more manageable. Actually, one of our founding residents said something I felt very poignant that I've thought about a lot. And he calls his decision to live at Culdesac a vitality move. So he's being very conscious about wanting to extend his life and be very healthy and thoughtful about what his life looks like. And Culdesac Tempe is designed to help, he feels, help him make healthy decisions like walking and biking and sort of interacting with other people. So he's planning to move to Culdesac Tempe from Minnesota for this vitality decision.
And speaking of vitality, can you talk a little bit about how you selected this location? Honestly, Arizona is obviously a big, diverse, sprawling area with lots of cars. And so how did you pick this location? And then what was the reaction that you received from the community, government leaders, and so on as you were pitching in this rather different concept? How was that received by those folks?
Yeah, we chose Tempe for its thriving job market, proximity to transportation, and forward-thinking, action-oriented local government. And we're really lucky that Tempe is a forward-thinking city and has a local government that wants to be at the forefront of innovation, moving the needle in real estate and technology. And their collaboration really has helped in the approval process, especially in the development agreement to design a neighborhood without residential parking spots. And it was important for us to find a city with that perfect fit that really aligned with our vision and where they want to take the city. It's also a city that's close to our hearts. I'm a third generation Phoenician, and my co-founder is a fifth generation Arizonan. And in fact, when I was 11 or 12, the first website that I ever built was for my grandpa, who was an engineer, trying to map out what the light rail in Phoenix could look like in 2020. And so it was a bit surreal to be getting going on Culdesac in 2020. And that light rail largely exists. And we're really excited to bring this type of walkable neighborhood to Tempe.
The backdrop that we're in right now, it seems across the country, is that real estate prices are going up, and in the cities you mentioned, New York and San Francisco, obviously very expensive. Can you talk a little bit about how this project accounts for equitable access to affordable housing, and the considerations that you put into that for making sure that people of all backgrounds have ability to potentially live in the community?
Sure. I think one of the things we like to thinking about sort of access to housing is something that Ryan talked about earlier, which is that 53% of Americans want to live in a walkable neighborhood, but only 8% do. And so the result is that walkable neighborhoods, there's this extreme supply demand mismatch. And so the result is that walkable neighborhoods across the US are priced prohibitively for most Americans. And so this is why cities like, or places like the West Village or San Francisco are so expensive. And so what we're doing is actually bringing this option of living in a walkable neighborhood to places like Arizona and places like Tempe. And when you're thinking about affordability, it's not just housing, of course, it's your cost for transportation as well. And so folks that live in the suburbs in Houston were actually found to spend more on their total cost of living because they're driving hours or an hour and a half into the city than people, living in dense downtown areas. And so by offering the amenities of on-site retail and access to transportation, we're hoping to create a lifestyle that's affordable, looking at the bigger picture, which is both housing and transportation.
And Lavi, you showed how the site connects to a number of public transportation options for residents. Can you speak to how the community is enabling people with different levels of mobility and ADA accessible people within the community, how you've accounted for that in your design?
Sure. I think one of the great things about the sort of fundamental product is that, once again, because we're able to create density with shorter 3-story buildings, actually all of the ground floor units at Culdesac Tempe can be converted into accessible units because there's no stairs to access them. And so it's actually created a lifestyle and a residential product that we're really excited about from an accessibility standpoint. I think also from a transportation standpoint, it's very important that Culdesac is located on a light rail station, which we're hoping is accessible for all folks. And we're also, like I said, excited to offer a variety of transportation options. So you don't just need to be able to bike or walk. We also will have on-site car share, and we'll be integrated with rideshare companies as well.
And can you talk, both of you, about the process of how you've engaged transit agencies, in this case Valley Metro, and or TMCs or car sharing companies, as you're developing the project, and how they can integrate into being able to provide service to the community?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So Valley Metro has been an incredible partner with us. They're very excited, right? I mean, they are getting to have a community that is designed to use Orbit and light rail and the Tempe bus system. So we've been very excited to work with Valley Metro. Actually, we just passed with the city of Phoenix and the Valley Metro board the sort of first piece of legislation in the Valley that allows real estate developers to give their residents access to the Valley Metro Platinum Pass, which is an unlimited access pass to light rail at an affordable price. Up until now, only employers had had access to this amenity. So, you'll have companies like State Farm or something give their employees access to this Platinum Pass. But we actually said, hey, let's expand access. Let's let multifamily developments or sort of other communities give their residents access to this pass. And so we're excited to say that we worked closely with the city of Phoenix and Valley Metro on that, and we've just passed that piece of legislation. So they've been great partners. I think on the mobility partner side or mobility company side, they're also really excited. They're looking at Culdesac Tempe as a sandbox because all of our residents are power mobility users, or future residents, I should say. So something like 90% use rideshare, 70% have used scooter share. And so mobility companies see this as an opportunity to test out new products with a captive, highly sort of active from a mobility perspective audience. And then also work with us to design the way that communities and cities can be designed, taking in transportation in mind. So one of the core theses of Culdesac is that real estate and transportation work best together. And transportation has been innovating rapidly, but real estate is built the same way it's been built for decades. And so mobility companies are very excited to co-create, well, what could real estate look like when you take new modern forms of transportation in mind?
That's a great point and a segue to a question we had earlier about, did you collectively engage in any kind of behavioral science research to look at how people want to live in the future and how that influenced the design and development of the project?
Yeah, I mean, I think we certainly did. And it's a little bit what I was talking about earlier about interviewing folks on the grocery store and, the courtyards. I think that was a lot of how our design was influenced.
Mm-hmm.
Another piece or example I can give there is Phoenix-Tempe is not only Culdesac is not only the developer of Culdesac-Tempe, we're also the property manager. And so we also want to think about the experience of living at Culdesac-Tempe. And so this is something as simple as, what's the experience of moving in, to what's the experience of interacting with your community. And so one piece of insight from a behavioral standpoint is we were thinking about how to design the move-in process for Culdesac-Tempe, and we interviewed a section of our founding residents. We initially thought that we wanted to make it a big party. You're coming to Culdesac, and we wanted to make it really exciting, but
Right.
Found out through a lot of really great qualitative research that when folks move in, they actually, I mean, we all know it's the worst experience ever is moving. And so people really just want to relax, take a couple of days to settle down and then engage in community and fun and meeting people. So that's fundamentally influenced how we think about the property management side of things as well. And so we're just really lucky to have this demand for Culdesac, because it also allows us to talk to our founding residents and better design the experience for them.
A bunch of questions coming in, so I'm going to do my best to try to get to as many of these as I can in the time we have. One of the questions is there bike storage capabilities within the project itself? So if you're not obviously owning a car, how do you accommodate bikes, scooters, and other forms of personal mobility within the actual space itself?
Yeah, there's lots of bike storage. There's residents won't have cars or parking, but we think that lots of them will have bikes. E-bikes are exploding in popularity in Tempe, and so there's 1,000 bike parking spots. Just like Amsterdam, there's more bike parking spots than residents.
And with that, Ryan,
by the way, the apartment that we're calling from, their marketing materials have pictures of bikes, but they have 0 bike parking spots.
This is good. And with that, is there charging stations for e-bikes throughout the space? I think I saw something there, Lava, but I just wanted to confirm that as well.
Yeah, there's charging spaces. There's charging spaces for e-bikes throughout.
Okay. Another question coming in. With so many people moving to the community from out of state, whether it be California or New York that you mentioned, are these units coming pre-furnished, or to make things simpler for folks, or are they bring your own possessions and occupy from there?
That's a great example of how interacting with our founding residents is helping us influence our product. So we've received a lot of requests for furnished units. It wasn't something we were planning on doing. And it's something that we're taking into consideration because of the demand for furnished units.
Okay. And are you offering, is there a bundle with residents where they can get discounted transit passes that allow them access to multiple types of transit service or micromobility? Is that part of the move-in package, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, part of living at Culdesac-Tempe will, for instance, be getting access to something like the Valley Metro Platinum Pass, which is a subsidized pass.
Okay.
And in addition, getting access to the amenities that allow you to live car-free, ample bike parking, on-site car share, and things like that.
And how will this design for this project potentially influence your desire to move to other locations? Or is there an idea around bringing a community like this to other cities, whether it be in Arizona or other parts of the United States?
Our vision is to build the first car-free city in the US. There's enormous demand for walkable neighborhoods, and we're the first car real estate developer. This project is about 1,000 residents, and our plan after this is, instead of just replicating it and building the same size over and over, we want to build something larger, to do something that's maybe 5 to 10 times as large, because we could do more interesting things with transportation at a larger scale. And we think that there's demand for so much of this.
Okay. Another question coming in, is it both you can rent and potentially own units within the complex, or is it purely a rental model only?
This one is rentals, although in the future we would love to include options to own.
Okay. And can you talk about how you're communicating with the community about the progress of the project, the timeline for completion, and bringing people along in that journey? Can you, either of you, describe a little bit about how you're going about that process?
Yeah. So we, during COVID have been hosting monthly virtual events with our founding residents and community. We have these events with, like I said, sometimes it's more of a co-design session with our landscape architects or the architects of the community. Sometimes it's just learning from local bikers. So we had Eric Cedeno, who is a local biker. He's kind of the head of the brand Bicycle Nomad. And he, actually took our residents on a socially distanced bike ride around Tempe and shared some of his favorite bike paths. So we have frequent communication from an event perspective. And then we also do a lot of ad hoc research depending on what we're working on.
Very good. As expected, a question of how did you arrive on the name Culdesac for the project?
We thought of it. We thought of it over dinner, and especially in a place, place like suburbia, it evokes these feelings of warmth and home and community, and also it's got a bit of irony because cul-de-sacs have gotten a bit of a bad name in planning circles as sort of how not to design subdivisions, but yet at Open Door, so many buyers wanted to live right in the cul-de-sac, and it's not a coincidence that that's the only car-free space in suburbia. And so for a number of reasons, we like the name, because we're going to bring that little car-free slice everywhere.
Very good. One question, are you seeing an interest of more people who are moving from suburban locations wanting to move to the downtown area in light of this project?
We're seeing go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ryan.
We're seeing enormous demand from all over. 60% of the founding residents are actually relocating to Arizona.
From outside the state, you mentioned. Okay. And is this, do you anticipate this to be part of an expanding footprint potentially in Tempe, other parts of Tempe potentially?
So on this one, this site is a platinum location. This site is on a light rail station that's already built on a line that has high ridership. And so there's not immediately available space to expand. And,
okay.
And so we're evaluating locations across the country, but this is not a situation where we can just grow right next to where we are.
Another question coming in, is the site sold out already as far as available units, or is there still space available?
Yeah, we've only sort of opened up the wait list for our first phase, and it's oversubscribed, but we'll be opening up the wait list for our future phases soon.
And on that point, Lava, how many units are in phase one for the project?
The first phase is 130 units.
Okay. And the other question was timing for it being fully developed, the project being fully developed. I know you're still in the early stages of construction, but.
Yeah, so we're doing a rolling development, so the kind of project will be opening over time, and we're excited to open next year, and have this first phase come in.
Very good. One other piece, obviously, is we're coming through this COVID period, and you're working with transportation companies who are bringing people to and from the community. How are you working with them to ensure the safety, security, cleanliness of people coming and going as we're all trying to emerge from this COVID backdrop that we've been living in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, we were, in the kind of final stages of finalizing the site plan around COVID. And
Mhm.
one of the things that we realized is that actually Culdesac Tempe um, was really well positioned for COVID because of how much outdoor space there is and how little shared indoor space there is. And so if you take a look at the site map, or from what I was sharing earlier, 55% of the site is open space, and there's actually no shared indoor space to access your unit. So unlike almost all multifamily in Tempe, where you have to, walk into a shared lobby, enter into a shared elevator, walk through a shared hallway to get to your unit, to access all of the units at Culdesac Tempe, you walk entirely outdoors. You don't need to share indoor space. And so we were happy to see that we were well positioned on that front. We made one key decision to further position us for COVID. And that was, we used to have, we previously had a food hall designed and actually converted that into an outdoor food truck park.
Okay.
But other than that, just given inherently how much outdoor space we were excited about how well positioned we are for COVID.
And some of the residents said, "Wow, you're almost built for remote work." But also, we've seen shifts because we work for all of the different transportation modes. We've seen as things have shifted, we're well positioned for that, right? So if light rail usage goes down, that doesn't change everything for us, as opposed to with the explosion in demand for e-bikes, we're ready for that. And also, if you look at if there's a shift from sharing different systems to more ownership models for scooters and e-bikes or subscription services, that all works great with Culdesac.
Ryan, you bring up a great point. If more people move to a remote working environment, obviously doing what we're doing today, video conferencing activities, how is the technology built into the design of the complex and the neighborhood to enable higher speed broadband connectivity and other things that people are going to be relying on more as they go forward?
Yeah, so we're built from the ground up for shared mobility, and so it's the technology and it's also the design. So if you think about normally how housing is built, you built just like how prior things have built, but instead we have custom pickup and drop off spots. We have wider pickups for future technologies like driverless cars. And also we think about using our technology background, how do we make the services that we offer work seamlessly? As you know, there's a lot to be desired in how a lot of housing in the U.S. is provided today.
And Lavin, the comment you made a second ago about the shared space, is that shared space only for the residents of the community, or can it be rented, so to speak, for events and things when it's safe to do so again? Is there some flexibility there?
Yeah, the bookable shared space, is going to be predominantly used by residents. And for some of the spaces that are more hosting related, we may open it up to the community. But we're excited to give residents the ability to kind of extend their home on demand. And actually, one thing that I wanted to mention, to Ryan's point that he just made about how Culdesac Tempe is built for remote work is, someone kind of had made that comment, a remote worker that's planning to move to Culdesac. And it's actually quite interesting how this is. So, one thing is that we'll have site-wide high-speed internet. So actually a lot of people are excited to work from the park, for instance. But also the number one thing that remote workers want when we've interviewed them is actually a sense of community. So what they're lacking in terms of, in-person interaction is not something that they want to miss out on. They actually want to supplement that. So that's one of the reasons why, kind of an interesting insight we found is that remote workers are excited to move to Culdesac so they can engage in, in-person community.
Very good. Another question we had was around van pools, carpooling. You mentioned micromobility and rideshare, but have you accommodated van pools and things of that nature into your design to allow for people to be picked up and commute when it's safe to resume back in-person work environments?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you think about the different transportation modes and what the providers are doing, obviously carpooling is something that is slowed down a bit during COVID. But we're ready. We're ready made for that design. We're excited for carpooling in the future, and everyone is no more than 1 minute away from a car pickup spot.
And where is the project now? You guys still there?
We're here.
Okay,
back.
sorry, there was a little bit of
My
a
name is
flash.
Ryan. I work with Culdesac. Thanks for inviting me.
It was a little flash on the screen. I wasn't sure what happened. Sorry, I was just going to ask, where are you at currently in the state of construction with the project?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we broke ground, at the end of 2019, and there's a little bit of a delay because of COVID, but we are sort of doing a lot of our site work, going to start horizontal, and then excited to see buildings.
Very good. And is one other question that's come in is, how is the neighborhood going to be equipped to accommodate autonomous vehicles or autonomous transit? As far as pickup locations, drop-off locations, things of that nature. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so that's a technology that's continuing to get developed. So it's about building to how that might be rolled out in the future. But the biggest thing that we have is extra wide spots that are for what will make it easier to deploy autonomous technology at Culdesac.
Yeah, and these are also pull in spots, pick up and drop off spots that don't require reversing and are long enough so that they don't require a sharp angle. I believe it's 45 degrees. And so autonomous vehicles, it's sort of the specification for what autonomous vehicles today are designed for. And, of course, one of the best things about Arizona and the Tempe area specifically is actually there are already today fully autonomous rides happening with Waymo. And so it's actually a technology that in Arizona is a bit closer than in some other places. So we're very excited that the community allows for that.
One very practical question as we're nearing the hot summer months is what accommodations have been put in play to provide for a walkable community for people to kind of be shaded and out of the direct heat for the hotter months of the year?
Yeah,
so go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, I saw some park-like settings, but I was just curious about other design plans that accommodate for the hotter summer months.
Yeah, so because of the design of Culdesac Tempe, and so this is like human scale 3-story buildings, all oriented around shared courtyards. Actually, Culdesac Tempe will be one of the most shaded developments in Tempe. So at the hottest, most sun sort of day of the year, 45% of the site will be covered in shade, but most of the year it's actually more like 60 or 70%. So there's a lot of provided shade on site. And as in Arizona, summers outside. Actually, I don't come from Arizona, but one of the things I was most surprised when I moved here is that in the summers, folks love to still be outside as long as there's misters and a good breeze. So we'll have misters everywhere, and are excited to keep that Arizona tradition of indoor outdoor living going strong.
Yeah, when people talk about the heat in the summer, I ask them to describe like the visual of that situation, and the situation that they're talking about is actually getting in their car, where they get in and their car's got the greenhouse gas effect, and it's not 100 degrees, it's like 150 degrees. And you don't have that. That's one of the reasons why I'm so bullish on e-bikes, and it disproportionately helps in Arizona, because on the hot days, you don't have to exert yourself as much and you get a nice breeze. And so we think that this is an especially great place to live in Arizona in the summer.
Yeah, I should actually, I want to out myself a little bit, but I get cold very easily. And so I e-bike with gloves on most months of the year. So people think that might sound funny in Arizona, but that's how much breeze you get, and how nice it is. So I echo that e-biking is really a great way to stay cool in the summer.
Yes, indeed. And you're definitely going through the transition, Lava, from Houston to Arizona.
I know.
Minus the humidity factor.
Yeah, right.
Huge humidity factor. So I'm running close to the end of our time, but one other question is for other communities who look at a project like this and might be looking to try to develop something along these lines, what advice would you have for those communities of the steps that lead up to the design of a project like this, and then getting a project approved and all the way through toward actual construction. Can you give any thoughts on how other parts of the United States might approach something like this?
Yeah, I think the simplest message is that there is enormous demand for walkable neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And if you build a thoughtful, walkable neighborhood that's got a great sense of community, that demand is going to be there. And we're looking to expand. And if you want to have a cul-de-sac at your city, email us at nextcity@culdesac.com.
Nextcity@culdesac.com.
Yep.
All right. We will we'll definitely get that posted for follow-up. And
Yep.
to that point, Ryan, public transportation proximity to these developments sounds pretty crucial. Is that right from your vantage point?
So transportation is a very important part to where we go.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a range of different transportation technologies. And so what we would say is let's talk about the sites that a city has in mind. And let's think about what are the different ways that we could give a great mobility experience for people there. There's a range of different things that can work.
Lava, any thoughts on your side of advice to other communities, other parts of the country that might be looking at something like this?
I can only speak to sort of the collaboration and strength that the city of Tempe has brought to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really role modeling what a great partner a city can be with a developer. And so I spoke earlier about how the fire department sort of co-collaborated on the width of the fire lanes, but I think there was that type of collaboration throughout the city, everything from the height of the buildings to the color palette to how do we think about security and SEPTED, and even regionally, of course, Valley Metro, the city of Phoenix have been great partners. And so I think the biggest thing is really open-mindedness and collaboration and really seeing what the future is. The city of Tempe has gotten a lot of great attention for being very forward thinking. They have a massive kind of data arm. I think even recently they've started to test sewage water for COVID and opioid use. And that type of energy and sort of looking at the future is really what's enabled us to be excited to build here. And so I think, just following the city of Tempe's example and being great partners.
This is definitely a case study to follow and monitor, I think, for everybody who's watching. And we look forward to seeing the progress of the project. I want to thank you both. I know we're at the top of the hour for both of your contributions. This has been an excellent discussion and for giving us a preview of the project. And we look forward to checking back in with you to see how things are going in the months ahead. And to Casey and David and everybody who's been able to join, thank you this morning and this afternoon for your time. And if you have any follow-up questions, you've got our contact information below. And we look forward to hosting you to the next webinar coming up soon.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Lava. Thank you, Ryan. Really great job. Well done. And to all our participants still on the call, appreciate you joining us today. And if you do have any questions for any of our panelists today, please feel free to reach out to them if we did not get your questions answered. Our next webinar will be Thursday, April 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern time on cause marketing, giving consumers a higher purpose. So please join us for that one. Registration is open on the ACT website, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you all.
Thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.